All right, let's start with this story that broke about 3 days ago on Tenet Media, and the claim of the Justice Department that Russia's paid Tenet Media to push pro-Kremlin messages in social media. Tenet Media, Tenet Media is a Tennessee company run by Lauren Chen and Liam Donovan. Lauren Chen is fairly well known among kind of right-wing influences, if you will. We'll talk about Lauren in a minute. I don't know anything about Liam Donovan. They're both young. They're both originally from Canada. They founded Tenet Media in 2022. And by November 2023, they'd assembled a lineup of pretty big names. You know, Benny Johnson, who I don't know. Tim Pool, I think everybody knows Tim Pool, and Dave Rubin. Dave Rubin I will know pretty well. And I guess they would take content from these guys and they would post it on Tenet's platform. Well, it turns out that the money that they got in order to found this Tenet and in order to initially pay the social media stars was money that came from basically the Russian government, from a program the Russians have of disinformation, of stirring things up in the United States, of creating as much havoc and mayhem as possible in the United States, and promoting Russian propaganda on top of that. And as I think I said yesterday or the other day, I mean, I've heard some rants from Tim Pool, at least. It certainly sounded like Russian propaganda, where he just goes after the Ukrainians, and I mean, the nonsense. And it just sounded like pure vitriol. Now, he claims, of course, he was not influenced by all of this. Maybe he was chosen to be on this platform because he already had the right views. I don't know. But it sure does seem suspect that here the Russians are spending $10 million and, Tim Pool at least. I know less about Dave Rubin's views about Russia and Ukraine, and I don't know anything about Benny Johnson. But at least Tim Pool's views on Russia are pretty bad and pretty consistent with Russian propaganda. The idea, I think the Russians generally have every incentive to create conflict and dissent within the United States. It's part of their, I think, political agenda, part of their political goals. I think they care less about who wins the election, although I think they want Trump to win. I think they care less about who wins the election and much more about the conflict, the dissent, the dysfunction of American society. They believe, and I think absolutely right, that to defeat America, the only power in the world today that can defeat America is America itself. That is, America will be defeated from the inside. Russia does not want to face America in the battlefield. The same is true of China. They have no interest in facing America in the battlefield. They would much rather create dissent and sow the seeds of conflict within America, so that if ever there is a conflict, America would back down and walk away because there's just not enough unity in the country to actually do anything to protect American interests, because nobody can even agree on what those interests are. Now, this payment to Tenet, is supposedly part of this covert Russian influence operation. And then it struck me, okay, we get that. It's good to know. It's important to know where the money comes from. It's valuable to know that this is direct from Russia. We can then deal with and approach kind of what Tenet produces and what Tenet brings out there appropriately. But then the question is, okay, but what's the crime? What's the actual crime? Why isn't this covered under free speech, right? What is the crime? Where's the violation of individual rights that occurs when the Russian government pays people in the United States to spread its propaganda? As bad as that is, and I can see that being bad, as evil as that is, as wrong as that is, as destructive as that is, where are rights being violated, and what is exactly the crime? And I'm not sure. I don't. I'll tell you in a minute what the crime is from the Justice Department's perspective. But objectively, should there be laws against foreign government interference? Yes, I know neocon. I know what they're being accused of. But so they're being accused that they violated, and there was a conspiracy to violate it, Foreign Agents Registration Act. There's also a conspiracy to launder money. We'd have to look into the details of what money laundering happened here. It's quite possible there's money laundering, but I'm always suspicious of money laundering because certainly in a free society there will be no laws against money laundering because it's not clear what money laundering would apply to. But would there be a Foreign Agent Registration Act? I don't know. Do foreign agents not have the right to free speech? Is there something about you being a foreigner, or now it is a government, so maybe you could argue foreign government should have influence in the United States. Does the United States have influence among foreign governments? Did the United States broadcast news and other stuff into other regimes? Yes, but those regimes are authoritarian, so that's okay. So the parallel doesn't really work. I'm just not convinced. It might be that somebody can make an argument why it would be illegal in the United States to accept money from a foreign government and lobby and try to influence. But it's not obvious to me that a law like that would be legit in a completely free market. But we live in this world. We don't live in a free market. We live with the laws the way they are. And the idea is that if you're going to represent a foreign government, then you have to register so that everybody knows that you're representing a foreign government, that you're speaking for a foreign government. And that is a law as it is today, and these people obviously didn't. It's interesting that the indictment is charging not the indictment is charging not the people who run Tenet. It's not charging them. It is actually charging two Russians who are based in Moscow, who work for Russian, what used to be called Russian Today, is today called RT. They both work for RT. They are the ones, I guess, that provided the funding to Tenet. I don't know what Tenet's legal standing is. I think what I've read is that the speculation is that Lauren Chen and her husband are basically working with the FBI, that they were probably approached by the FBI in this investigation, and they chose to become state witnesses so that they would not be indicted. Tenet has shut down its operations. Tim Pool has come out and said that he has been approached by the FBI as a victim of, in a sense, a fraud, and he is speaking to counsel, but is expected to cooperate with the FBI in its investigation of this attempt by Russian authorities to influence things. So this is where we stand in terms of Tenet media. Obviously, it's gone. The videos that it posted have been taken off YouTube. So YouTube is basically shut down. I don't think they've shut down Tim Pool, but they've shut down anything that Tenet itself kind of repackaged Timecast is obviously still on YouTube, and so is Tim Pool. Those are his two channels. So that's all still on YouTube. But Tenet is gone, right? But it's also shut down as a company. I haven't heard any comments from Dave Rubin, but I mean, I can't imagine Dave knew that that this was going on. I can't imagine that Dave had anything to do with Russian money. Again, he's probably silent under advice of counsel, which probably makes sense. If this is an ongoing investigation, it's probably better just not to be involved. Justice Bond was also claiming, and again, I don't see any reason to doubt this or to suspect that this is not the case. They're also claiming that this is part of a much bigger attempt of the Russian government and probably the Iranian government and probably the Chinese government to influence the American elections and to create, again, havoc and conflict and issues. But, propaganda, you have a right. I just don't see, certainly if the propaganda is produced domestically, if it's not funded by a foreign government, there can't be a law against that. Propaganda is covered under free speech. I guess it gets a special category because it's from a foreign government. I'd really be interested if to talk to kind of a legal expert whether the Foreign Investment Act or whatever is a legit kind of law. I don't know. All right, what else do we want to know? It looks like Rubin has released a statement. Neb Sampson says Rubin has released a statement. That's good to know. It looks like, as I said, Tenet is shut down. Tenet is not named in the indictment. So it just says that it just everybody knows it's Tenet, but it wasn't named in the indictment. Again, the indictment is not against Tenet or its principals. The indictment is against these Russians and who influenced Tenet. So Tenet is shut down just based on that information, not because I think the government has forced it to shut down. Yep. Yeah, all right. So that is where we are. There is an interesting angle here, though, that I think we should contemplate within this context of what we discussed yesterday. And that is, does one sanction bad people? Should one sanction people who sanction bad people? And again, this goes back to Uncle Gate's talk from Ocon this last year, which I encourage everybody to go watch. It's on the Ayn Rand Institute website or YouTube channel. But here's the question. So Lon Chen, a young influencer, right-wing influencer, but Lon Chen has clearly come out with some pretty outrageous and horrible, at least sanctions, right? She had a 3-part interview with Richard Spencer, the white supremacist. She has defended Nick Fuentes on a number of occasions. I think at least, a number of occasions she's defended Nick Fuentes. She's had interactions with a number of people who I would view, I don't know about you, I would view as part of the alt-right, as disgusting people, as white supremacists, as anti-Semites. Nick Fuentes, think about Nick Fuentes, how horrible he is. And is Lawrence Southern, we'll get to Lawrence Southern in a minute. Anyway, somebody like Lon Chen, who, this is all known, none of this is a secret, that she holds these views and has interacted with these people and has positively presented them, Richard Spencer, Nick Fuentes. So she comes to you with a proposition, a business deal. I will take your material and post it here, and I will pay you X for this material. And maybe it's lucrative, I don't know, but Tim Pool is pretty wealthy. He makes a lot of money on his endorsements and on his podcast. I know that Dave Rubin has done phenomenally well, right? And why do you go into business with a woman like this? Why would you sign a contract, any kind of contract, even a contract that benefits you enormously, with somebody who has disgusting views? Somebody who's willing to sanction the Nick Fuenteses of the world and the Richard Spencers of the world. I don't understand why Dave Rubin would, it's not a matter of getting into bed, but why Dave Rubin would want anything to do with a woman like this, even if she was writing him a check. Getting into business with Lauren Chen is basically sanctioning Lauren Chen, which is basically sanctioning, endorsing Nick Fuentes and Richard Spencer and all these scumbags. And we're not talking about, interviewing her even or debating her. We're talking about getting into business with her. Now, Lauren Southern is one of the influences that Tenet, promoted. So it had Tim Pool and Dave Rubin and Lauren Southern. Why would you want to? I mean, now I don't know how much you guys know about Lauren Southern, but Lauren Southern is despicable. She's horrible. She praised Dugan she interviewed Dugan and praised him. What a wonderful guy he was, and she's a racist and she's stupid on capitalism. I did a whole thing of Lauren Southern commenting on her commentary on capitalism. Why would you want to be listed? I mean, you couldn't pay me enough money. And hey, I'm asking for money all the time, right? So I like money. But you couldn't pay me enough money to be on a list with Lauren Southern. Like, hey, Yaron, join our network. We'll give you $1 million. You'll be one of the many hosts together with Lauren Southern. No, I'm not going. I'm not doing it. Now, I could accidentally do it. I could be invited to a conference and somebody like that could be another guest. And I would repudiate it once I knew that person was there. So, I don't understand. And this is the issue related to Tucker Carlson yesterday. So I want to read you, because it directly relates to the Tucker Carlson issue yesterday, because it relates to sanctioning the sanctioners, and it relates to this. And by the way, Lauren Chen has her own show on The Blaze. Why would The Blaze want to have anything to do with this woman? I mean, The Blaze has some sketchy people, has had forever. I mean, Glenn Beck is somewhat sketchy right to begin with. But Glenn is not anti-Semitic. He's not a racist. I know Glenn, at least the Glenn Beck that I knew. Why would Glenn Beck want to have Lauren Chen as one of his personalities on The Blaze, given who she has sanctioned, who she's interviewed? You see, there's this attitude with, and this is the Tucker Carlson attitude. You should be able to interview anybody. Just because you interview somebody doesn't mean you sanction them, doesn't mean you agree with them. It doesn't mean you agree with them, true. But one, if you don't make it very clear you don't agree with them, then the assumption is you do to some extent. Two, you're definitely saying that this person you're interviewing is legit. The point of view is a point of view that is worthy of listening to. It's worthy hearing. This is what Tucker Carlson did with this historian. Now he also called him the best, most interesting historian right now, or something like that. So he went even further. But if you defend Nick Fuentes, even if you defend him only on a particular issue, you're saying Nick Fuentes is a legitimate commentator. He might say wrong things sometimes, but this is worth defending. And let's be very clear, Nick Fuentes is a scumbag from beginning to end. He's an evil bastard. Nobody should have anything to do with him, and nobody should ever defend anything he says, even if once in a while he's right about something. Because the package is disgusting. It's offensive. It's evil. It's anti every value that any decent human being would have. He is a, white supremacist, anti-Semite, Holocaust-denying SOB, right? You see this over and over and over again. If you interview somebody, anybody you interview, you raise them up and given them the status of interesting and credible. Otherwise, why are you interviewing? There are a million people you could interview. Now somebody says, Lex Friedman is similar, he'd interview almost anyone. I don't think that's true. Now Lex will interview a wide array of people. That's a shtick. But I can't think of anybody he's interviewed, and I might be wrong, but I can't think of anybody who's interviewed that's really, maybe on the Israel-Palestinian thing, he's interviewed some people I think he shouldn't have. But he's not going to interview Nick Fuentes. He's not going to interview Lawrence Southern, I don't think. He's not now, unfortunately, people on the left are perceived as more credible than people on the right. So, you could see him interviewing somebody like Noam Chomsky, sadly. But Noam Chomsky's at a university, he's a big name, he's a big shot, most cited academic in American academia over the last, 50 years or something. So there's some credibility there. He interviewed Kanye, and he at least, give him credit, he pushed back on Kanye. He shouldn't have interviewed him, but at least he pushed back on him. Versus these people don't push back. Who basically, Tucker Carlson didn't push back on anything this guy said. And he said some pretty horrible, stupid things, irrational things, and historically ignorant things. A lot of historians have since corrected. But there is this attitude that it's okay to interview anybody. Certainly Tucker Carlson has this. I should be able to interview anybody. It doesn't mean I'm endorsing them. I saw Tucker Carlson today on Charlie Cook's show, of course. And Charlie Cook, what's all this theory about? What's the big deal? What happened? Nothing, no big deal. And Tucker goes, yeah, what was the big deal? So this guy has a slightly different view on what caused, on the way World War II evolved and the role Churchill has. And you might not agree with him, but he's not completely crazy, and there's some reasonable things to say here. And so even if he's wrong, say he's wrong, but it's interesting. He's challenging the status quo a little bit, which is a complete whitewashing of what this guy stands for, particularly if you go and research him a little bit on Twitter. This guy is a Nazi apologist. And Tucker Carlson has had a Nazi apologist on, and then he kind of, just asking questions. Just asking questions. And this is the attitude today on the right. The attitude of, anybody's acceptable. This is why I won't debate Dave Smith. I don't think he's credible. I don't think he's worthy of debate. I don't think he has any virtue. Why would I want to be on the same stage as somebody who spouts these, just horrific lies about Ukraine, horrific lies about Israel, horrific lies about capitalism? So, I don't think these people are worthy of interacting with us. I don't think they're worthy of one's sanction. Even a debate, to some extent, you're sanctioning the opposition. So I don't understand why these people, why Dave and Tim Pool and these other guys, why they got into business with Law and Chen. But there is this attitude on the right that they don't believe in guilt by association. Now that is moral cowardice. It is moral. God, the word escapes me. But it's cowardice. It's giving up on morality. It's that issue of don't judge. Of course, you're guilty by association. You associate with Nazis. That's bad. You should be judged for associating with Nazis. You interview a neo-Nazi or Nazi apologist, you should be judged. You, I don't know, hang out with Lauren Southern, but you don't agree with her. You should be judged for hanging out with somebody as awful as Lauren Southern or Lauren Chen or any of these people are. So J.D. Vance was asked what he thought and will he appear with Tucker Carlson? Will he appear on Tucker Carlson's show? And this is what a spokesman of J.D. Vance, Senator Vance, vice presidential candidate Vance, had to say. Quote, Senator Vance doesn't believe in guilt by association, cancel culture, but he obviously does not share the views of the guest interviewed by Tucker Carlson. There are no stronger supporters of our allies in Israel or the Jewish community in America than Senator Vance and President Trump, unquote. And then he goes on to attack Kamala Harris. So they don't believe in guilt by association, cancel culture. And this is the thing. Now, I've seen this in some of the commentary that I've received on Twitter and elsewhere. I've seen this argument. To believe in guilt by association, you're a leftist. And it means you agree with the left on cancel culture. And that is just the most bizarre thing. I mean, I actually have a smidgen of respect for the left in the sense that they're willing to judge. And yeah, they're willing to cancel people based on their judgment. You hold these views? You believe in that? I don't want to work with you. Fire the bastard. Is that wrong? Isn't that the way the world should work? I mean, if we didn't have anti-discrimination laws, if we didn't have, false firing, false dismissal laws, and all the massive regulations of employer-employee relationships, wouldn't it work like that if you found out that one of your employees held ideas that you found despicable, whatever your ideas were? Wouldn't you cancel them?